from Sax School. In this lesson video, I'm going to tell you about one of the most influential sax players in rock and roll, and there's a fair bet you've probably never heard of him. Sam the Man Taylor played with big names like Ella Fitzgerald, Ray Charles and Quincy Jones, but as a humble sideman and session musician, he never made it big with the general public. We're going to talk about some of his best tracks for you to go and discover for yourself. Plus, I've got a transcription for you of one of his iconic solos, which we're going to dig into as well. This month in Sax School, we're learning all about the blues. Our members are learning a fun original blues tune called Rambler Blues. As well, we'll be looking at some of the sax players who've defined the blues sax sound we all love. So, I'll tell you a little bit about Sam the Man Taylor and why he is important in the canon of R&B sax masters. In the 1950s, he was one of the most in-demand session musicians working in New York. He played on a staggering number of the rock and roll hits of the time, with everyone from Big Joe Turner to Louis Jordan and countless other famous names. Along with the likes of King Curtis and Lee Allen, Sam Taylor was one of the guys who pretty much wrote the book on how to play rhythm and blues saxophone. Sam Taylor was born in Lexington, Tennessee on the 12th of June 1916. After studying at Alabama State University, he played and toured with Cootie Williams, Lucky Millinder and Cab Calloway. But it was when he started working as a session musician in New York that his playing really got him noticed. He worked for big record labels including Atlantic, Savoy and Apollo, and he even replaced the great Count Basie as bandleader on Alan Freed's radio show Camel Rock and Roll Dance Party. Alan Freed, of course, was the guy who sold rock and roll to the mainstream American teenage audience. But, incredibly, despite being so much in demand in the music industry, Sam the Man Taylor wasn't recognised by the audience. They knew his sound, but they didn't know him by name. He even had a record deal with MGM, but his records didn't really sell because he just wasn't well known. And while some of his contemporaries, such as King Curtis, Rudy Pompili and Herb Hardesty have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Sam never was, so he is as unrecognised in death as he was in life, unfortunately. Although, interestingly, when Beatlemania overtook the music scene and the saxophone sort of dropped out of favour, Sam Taylor had a second career recording and performing in Japan, where he built up a large following, playing in a more sort of gentler and tranquil style. So, if you want to start checking out some of Sam the Man Taylor's sax playing, where should you start? Well, a great place to begin is an album called Rockin' at the Hop. On this album, Taylor leads his own band. It's an album of classic 50s R&B with Taylor's rocking, tough tenor sound. A great track to check out is Ooh Wee for an example of just what you can do with one note. Another track you should definitely listen to is Tailor Made. It's got the lot. Smears, some really fancy articulation work, and altissimo. And he really swings hard to boot. For something a little more laid back, try the album Tenor Sax Masters. It's an album full of jazz standards, and the track Cry Me a River is fantastic. He plays smooth as silk with a big fat tenor ballad sound. We're going to look at a classic Sam Taylor solo in a minute, but first, what's your favourite 50s rock and roll sax track? Does it feature playing in the style of Sam Taylor? So, we've talked about a couple of albums you can go and check out to hear Sam the Man Taylor's playing. If you want to explore further, have a listen to the track Midnight Rambler. I found it on the awesomely named Honkers and Screamers compilation album, which also features tracks by other greats such as Lee Allen, Big J McNeely and Hal Singer. The solo transcription I've got for you today is from Midnight Rambler. As a teenage sax player myself, I think I'd only just started playing. I heard this track on the radio in Melbourne and thought to myself, I want to sound like that. I remember ringing the radio station straight away to find out the name of the track so I could get a hold of it. I scoured the record shops to find it, and this was one of the first sax solos I ever transcribed. This track had a huge influence on my saxophone playing, and even now there's still so much great stuff in here. I think this is a fantastic track to learn if you're into R&B sax playing for several reasons. It's got fantastic growling, it's got smears, it's got scoops, it's got fall-offs, it covers the standard range, so from low B flat to high F, Sam Taylor drops a few bombs in this. He's not shy of doing that, and that always gets the audience going. It's not harmonically overly complicated. It's right firmly in the language of rhythm and blues and rock and roll saxophone. Download the transcription and backing track by visiting our blog. The link is in the description for this video. I really hope you enjoyed digging into it. So you'll notice in the transcription I've included some articulation, but there's a lot of information that I haven't put in, such as the bends and the fall-offs and all of that sort of stuff. So listen closely to Sam's playing and see if you can replicate that yourself. If you want to explore more rock and roll saxophone in this style, you should check out our cool challenge song for this month in Sax School. It's called Rambler Blues. And there's an easy lesson for beginner players, plus a more advanced lesson if you're more experienced or just fancy a challenge. So for me, the real gold here is not just in the notes, but the way Sam Taylor plays those notes and the authority with which he does it. I would suggest when you're practicing this for yourself that you really try and copy to the finest detail you can Sam Taylor's playing. Because Sam the Man Taylor is not a big well-known name, you don't often hear him name-checked in interviews. Other more famous players don't often mention him as an influence on their playing. In fact, not much has been written about him at all. But in my opinion, you can hear his influence in the music of many of the rock and roll sax players of the day, and even legends from more recent times like the great Clarence Clemens. Pretty much everything Sam Taylor played was definitive rock and roll rhythm and blues saxophone. Whether it's his tone, his growl, his articulation, scoops and smears, screaming high notes, if you want to play in this style, listen to Sam Taylor. It will really help you to get that authentic rock and roll sound. So have fun exploring the tracks I've mentioned here today, and go and check out the other lessons here on our channel that will help you get your blues playing together. And if you really want to go further, check out the huge range of lessons and courses, including loads on the blues, all included with your Sax School membership. You can find out more and grab a 14-day trial in the link down below. Check out the other videos on our channel. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.